My solicitor picked up on the second ring. That's the only reason I'm still standing today. Let me tell you what happened 48 hours before that call. Because without that context, none of what follows will make any sense. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm 67 years old. I live in a weatherboard house in Whanganui, on a quiet street lined with liquid ambar trees that turn the color of rust every autumn. My wife, Patricia, passed away 4 years ago from a stroke. She went quickly, which I'm told is a mercy, though I'm not sure I've ever quite forgiven her for leaving without saying goodbye. Patricia and I had 2 children. Our son, Daniel, is 41. Our daughter, Sophie, is 38. After Patricia died, I divided my time between the garden, long walks along the river, and doing my best not to become one of those sad old men who sits alone in front of the television eating cereal for dinner. I mostly succeeded. Mostly. The money came from Patricia's life insurance policy. $380,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was everything she'd quietly built over 30 years of careful living, skipping the extra holiday, buying the sensible car instead of the nice one, packing her own lunch every day until the week she retired. I called it her quiet gift. I kept it in a term deposit and told myself I'd use it carefully, for the right things, when the time came. I should have put it somewhere nobody else could touch it. Daniel rang me on a Tuesday morning in March, about 14 months ago. His voice had that particular brightness to it, the one I'd learned, too late, to be suspicious of. "Dad," he said, "I've been talking to a financial advisor, a bloke named Craig. He's found something really good. A property syndicate. Residential developments up in Tauranga. Guaranteed returns of 11% annually. Dad, this is exactly what Mum's money should be doing. It's just sitting there, doing nothing." I told him I'd think about it. He rang again on Thursday. Then on Saturday. Then he drove down from Hamilton 3.5 hours and arrived at my door with a folder full of documents and a look on his face like he was doing me an enormous favor. "Dad," Craig says, "the window is closing. There are only a few spots left. You don't want to miss this." I looked at my son sitting at Patricia's kitchen table, his shirt ironed, his hair neat, talking about guaranteed returns and investment windows. And I thought about all the times he'd come to us over the years, the failed cafe in Palmerston North, the online business that lasted 4 months, the campervan hire company he and his wife, Renata, had started and abandoned within a year. We'd helped him each time. Not enormous amounts, but enough. Enough to know that Daniel's enthusiasms tended to arrive with great urgency and depart without warning. But he was my son. And he was sitting where Patricia used to sit. And I was lonely in a way that's difficult to explain to anyone who hasn't buried their person. I signed the investment documents on a Wednesday afternoon in April. Daniel took a bank check for $380,000 back to Hamilton with him. He hugged me at the door and told me I'd made a great decision. Renata sent me a text that evening that said, "Thank you, Gerald. You won't regret this." 3 months passed. I didn't receive a single statement, not a single update, not a single email from this Craig. When I rang Daniel to ask, he said Craig was dealing with some admin delays. When I asked for Craig's direct number, Daniel said he'd pass it on. He never did. 6 months after I handed over the check, Daniel rang me again. His voice was different this time, tighter, faster. "Dad, there's been a complication with the syndicate. Regulatory issues. Craig says it might be another year before returns start flowing. But listen, there's actually a better opportunity now. A commercial development in Auckland. Craig has moved the funds across already. It's all fine. It's actually a better position." I put the phone down on the kitchen bench and sat very still for a long time. That was the moment I knew. I drove to see my solicitor, a woman named Margaret Firth, the following Monday. Margaret has handled my legal affairs for 22 years. She has the kind of face that doesn't react to much. Which is exactly what I needed that morning. I sat across from her and told her everything. The insurance money, the investment documents, the phone calls, the silence, the new opportunity. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I finished, she pulled the documents I'd brought across the desk and studied them for a long time. "Gerald," she said, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Did Daniel ever mention what firm this Craig works for?" I shook my head. "Did you receive anything on official letterhead? An FSP registration number? A disclosure statement?" I looked at the documents again, properly, for the first time. There was a logo I didn't recognize, an address in Auckland that looked like a serviced office, and a phone number. No registration details. No disclosure statement. Nothing that a regulated financial advisor in New Zealand is legally required to provide. Margaret sat back in her chair. "I'm going to make some calls," she said. "Don't contact Daniel until I tell you it's all right to do so. And Gerald, don't transfer another cent to anyone for any reason. Not until we know what we're dealing with." I nodded and drove home. I sat in the garden for most of that afternoon, watching the sparrows in the birdbath Patricia had picked out at a market in Nelson years ago. I kept thinking about her face, about what she'd said once, late at night, when she thought I was asleep. "I just want to know it's safe when I'm gone." Margaret rang me 2 days later. There was no Craig. Not a real one. The Financial Service Providers Register had no listing matching the name or the company on those documents. The Auckland address was a virtual office, rented by the month, registered to a shelf company that had been incorporated 8 months before Daniel approached me, and had no assets, no employees, and no history of any legitimate activity. The phone number had been disconnected. I sat in Margaret's office and felt the floor shift beneath me. "Gerald, I need you to understand what I'm about to tell you," she said carefully. "The structure of this, the documents, the pressure around timing, the escalation to a second opportunity when the first one stalled. This isn't a bad investment. This is a fraud. It was designed to look like an investment, but its only purpose was to extract money." "Daniel knew?" I said. The words came out very quietly. Margaret paused. "I think that's a question for the police. But someone who loves you doesn't bring you documents with no disclosure statement and take a check for nearly $400,000. I drove home and sat in Patricia's chair by the window and cried. Not for the money. I want to be honest about that. It was for the version of my son I'd been holding on to, the little boy who used to climb into our bed on Sunday mornings, who caught his first fish at Lake Taupo at the age of 7 and cried when we had to throw it back. I cried for the distance between that boy and the man who had sat at my kitchen table with a folder full of lies. I did not ring Daniel. I had promised Margaret I wouldn't, but Daniel rang me. It was a Thursday evening, about a week after my second meeting with Margaret. He sounded agitated. "Dad, I need to talk to you. Renata and I are in a bit of a situation. The timing on the investment has been pushed out further, and we've got some bills the mortgage is behind. There's the kids' school fees. I was wondering if—" "How much?" I said. A pause. 40,000 would get us through. I have replayed that moment many times since. I want to be careful not to make myself sound braver than I was. The truth is, part of me, the part that is still someone's father, wanted to say yes, wanted to sort it out and not have to face what sorting it out would really mean. Instead, I said, "Daniel, I've been to see Margaret Firth." The silence that followed was very long. "I know about the company," I said. "I know about the address. I know there's no Craig. Dad, that's you. Don't have all the—" "I've filed a report with the Serious Fraud Office," I said. This was only partially true at that point. Margaret had helped me prepare the report, but it hadn't been formally lodged yet. But I needed him to hear it. and I'm not giving you any more money." Daniel said something I won't repeat. Then he said, "You're going to destroy this family." "You did that," I said. "Not me." He hung up. What happened over the following 3 weeks was one of the most disorienting periods of my life. And I spent 2 of those years nursing a dying woman. So that tells you something. Renata began ringing my daughter Sophie, who lives in Christchurch. Renata told Sophie that I had lost the plot, that I was confused and paranoid, that I'd become impossible to deal with since Patricia died and the family was worried about my mental state. Sophie, to her credit, rang me directly and asked me to explain what was happening. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then said, very deliberately, "Give me Margaret's number." Meanwhile, Daniel appeared at my door one Saturday morning unannounced. He didn't knock. He had a key. I'd given it to him years ago, for emergencies. He walked into my kitchen while I was having breakfast and stood across the table from me with his arms crossed. "You need to stop this, Dad. You're going to get police involved. You're going to ruin everything. Craig is sorting it out. The money is coming. You just need to be patient." "There is no Craig, Daniel. There is. You just haven't. Margaret has got into your head. She's billing you by the hour, Dad. She's the one taking advantage of you, not me." I looked at my son, really looked at him. His face was doing something complicated. There was anger in it, yes, but underneath the anger was something that looked very much like fear. "Daniel," I said, "I want you to leave my house." He didn't move. "You're making a mistake. I'm 67 years old. This is my home. I want you to leave." He left. But before he did, he said something that I have thought about every day since. He stood in my doorway and said, "Mum would be ashamed of you." I closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a long time. There are things that are designed to wound you, and there are things that are designed to break you. That sentence was designed to break me. I think he knew it was the one thing that might make me fold, might make me withdraw the complaint, might make me hand over the $40,000 and pretend none of this had happened. It didn't break me, but I won't pretend it didn't come close. Margaret lodged the formal complaint with the Serious Fraud Office the following week. She also engaged a forensic accountant to trace the movement of the $380,000. That process took several weeks, but what it eventually uncovered was worse than I had allowed myself to imagine. The money had not gone into any property syndicate. Within 10 days of Daniel receiving my check, the funds had been moved across 4 different accounts, 2 in New Zealand, 1 in Australia, 1 in what appeared to be a jurisdiction in Southeast Asia. The shelf company had been used as a pass-through vehicle. Daniel and Renata's personal accounts showed deposits in the weeks following the transfer that corresponded to what appeared to be a distribution from the scheme. They had used my wife's life insurance money to pay their mortgage, their car payments, and a family holiday to Fiji. Margaret presented this to me on a gray Tuesday morning, and I sat in her office and felt something settle in me, a cold, quiet clarity. The grief was still there. I don't think that grief is ever going away, but the confusion, the doubt, the wondering whether I had somehow got it wrong, whether Daniel might have a reasonable explanation, all of that was gone. What replaced it was the decision to see it through. Sophie flew up from Christchurch. She sat with me in my kitchen and we talked for most of an evening about Daniel, about the family we thought we were, about Patricia, about what comes next. Sophie is a practical woman. She gets that from her mother. She didn't tell me what to feel. She didn't try to manage me. She just said, "Whatever you decide, Dad, I'm here." That meant more than I know how to say. The Serious Fraud Office investigation proceeded slowly, as these things do. But in parallel, Margaret worked with a barrister to pursue a civil claim against Daniel and Renata for the recovery of the funds. Because we had the forensic accounting evidence, the account movements, the timing of deposits, the correspondence Margaret had managed to subpoena, The civil case was strong. There was a mediation in September. Daniel arrived with a solicitor I didn't recognize and would not make eye contact with me across the table. Renata had stayed in Hamilton. Daniel's solicitor presented a position that the funds had been invested in good faith and that losses were the result of a third party acting fraudulently. Daniel, in this version of events, was also a victim. Margaret's barrister laid out the forensic accounting findings one page at a time. She did it quietly and methodically, the way you'd remove stones from a wall. When she was finished, the room was very still. We reached a settlement that day. I won't disclose the exact terms, but I will say that it required Daniel and Renata to refinance their home and that the repayment schedule extends for 12 years. They will be paying me back for the next 12 years. The SFO investigation is still ongoing. I've been told that criminal charges remain possible. I don't know what will happen there. I've stopped trying to predict it. What I do know is this. I am still in my weatherboard house in Whanganui. The liquidambar trees are beginning to turn again, which means autumn is coming, which means it's been about 14 months since all of this began. The bird bath is still in the garden. I sit beside it most evenings. Daniel and I have not spoken since the mediation. Sophie and I speak every Sunday. I have a regular card game on Wednesday afternoons with 3 men from my street who are all in their 60s and 70s and who are excellent company and who have never asked me to invest anything. I began this story by telling you that my solicitor picked up on the second ring, and I want to end by telling you why that matters. Not just to my story, but possibly to yours. We are taught, those of us who grew up in a particular time in a particular way, that family is the safest place. That the people who share your blood are the ones who will not hurt you. Or if they do, they will be sorry. And that will be enough. We are taught to give the benefit of the doubt to the people we love. To not rock the boat. To sort things out quietly. I gave my son $380,000 because I loved him, and because I was lonely, and because I wanted to believe that he was doing something right with his life. Those are not shameful reasons. I want to be clear about that. The shame belongs to him. But here is what I wish I had known, and what I want to say plainly. Especially to anyone sitting in a house that's too quiet since someone left it. Loneliness is the door that fraudsters, including family members, walk through. It's not a character flaw. It's a human condition, and it can be exploited by people who know you well enough to know what you need to hear. If someone presents you with an investment opportunity and creates urgency around it, slow down. Real investments do not disappear if you take 2 weeks to think. Real financial advisors in New Zealand are registered on the Financial Service Providers Register. And you can check that register yourself in 3 minutes on a computer. If the person presenting you with the opportunity is someone you love, slow down even more. Not because love is unreliable, but because love is the most powerful reason in the world to skip the steps you should never skip. Get a solicitor. Get an independent financial advisor. Show someone outside the situation what you're being asked to sign, not because you're suspicious of the person you love, but because protecting yourself is not the same as not trusting them. And if something feels wrong in your gut, in the way you sleep, in the small, uncomfortable way a voice on the phone doesn't quite sound like itself, take that seriously. You have 70 years of pattern recognition in you. It is not paranoia. It is information. Patricia was careful with money her whole life so that I would be safe. That was her gift to me. I came very close to losing it, because I wanted, one more time, to believe the best of someone I loved. I will not make that mistake again. If you are watching this, and you are over 60, and you are alone, and someone in your life, a child, a nephew, an old friend, is asking you to invest your savings, your pension, your partner's life insurance, the money you have spent decades building, please stop. Breathe. Make an appointment with a solicitor before you sign anything. That phone call cost me $150 for the first hour. It saved me everything else.